The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Lincoln Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenmeis,
Present.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Ms. Duncan,
Here.
Mr. Yestad,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
and Ms. Carlson.
Here.
Thank you. Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us to ceremonial matters. Tonight we do have a citation honoring U.S. Coast Guard Day. I will go ahead and read the citation, and then Dan will get his picture moment. You're welcome, Dan. Citation honoring U.S. Coast Guard Day. The City and Borough of Sitka recognizes August 4th as U.S. Coast Guard Day nationwide, and especially wishes to honor all Sitka-based personnel of the U.S. Coast Guard. Whereas, Sitka is a Coast Guard city, one of 29 communities in the nation to be so designated, and the City and Borough of Sitka and citizens take this responsibility seriously by making special efforts to acknowledge the professional work of the Sitka Coast Guard men and women, and reaching out to these personnel and their families and making them feel at home at their home away from home. And whereas August 4th is National U.S. Coast Guard Day, marking the birthday of the United States Coast Guard, which began in 1790 and received its present name in 1915, when Congress supported providing the nation with a single maritime service dedicating to saving life at sea and enforcing the nation's maritime laws, and later added maintaining the country's aids to maritime navigation and other missions. And whereas the City and Borough of Sitka and the community of Sitka continue to support and honor the 5 Sitka Coast Guard units: Air Station Sitka, Cutter Kukui, Aids to Navigation Team Sitka, Marine Safety Detachment Sitka, and Electronic Support Detachment Detail Sitka as Americans Guardians of the Sea. Now, therefore, the Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka, in recognition of the 233rd birthday of the U.S. Coast Guard and Sitka's status as a Coast Guard city, does hereby recognize the professionalism, skill, and unwavering devotion to duty of all Sitka Coast Guard personnel, and to provide Sitka with the safety, security, and stewardship of our oceans in an often dangerous world. We thank you and your families for your service. Signed and sealed today by myself and the clerk. Sir, if you could join us. Thank you for coming to represent the 5 units here in Sitka. We do have citations for all of them to proudly hang in their office. You don't have to, but I'd give you the opportunity to say a few if you'd like.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, everyone. Commander Vincent Jansen. I'm the commanding officer of Coast Guard Air Station Sitka, representing all 5 Coast Guard commands here this evening. Just today, a ferry arrived and welcomed another 8 coasties to the island. It's the time of year where we're saying goodbye to our shipmates as they sail usually back to the lower 48, and we're welcoming a lot of new faces. So thank you to the community for welcoming the Coast Guard women and men and their families into our community, and as you see them around town. Just this past 12 months, it's incredible that it's already been 12 months since we were last standing here together, but we've launched on over 190 search and rescue cases, saved over 140 lives, and of those 140 people, 123 needed higher levels of medical care, folks that we moved from the small villages all across Southeast Alaska to the hospitals. And that's an extremely humble mission to do, and we do it well. We launched in the dark and stormy while everybody's asleep during the wintertime. We're out there flying, moving folks, we're tending buoys, maintaining the waterways, and just maintaining the general safety and security of Southeast Alaska. There's about 180 coastie women and men here in Sitka. We do our job with much pride, and we're also very happy to be part of the Sitka community. So thank you, Mayor, and the Assembly for recognizing August 4th as Coast Guard Day as we celebrate our 233rd birthday. Thank you.
And thank you.
Dan, you good? Good. All right. We got everyone taken care of.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, we got you.
All right, that'll bring us to special reports this evening. We do have a scheduled special report, Child Care Now update. Please. We worked hard on the PowerPoint, so it should work. I'm hoping. Great, perfect.
Yeah, looking good. Thank you for allowing, oh, do I have to? Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to give you a broad update about childcare in Sitka. I prepared a PowerPoint that I'm not going to read all the slides for sake of time, but it's available to anybody listening or here in the audience at sitkakids.com. Right there on the screen, it tells you what I intend to talk about in 10 minutes, but we think we can do it. I'm here, Carrie Sagal, I work for the school district, and I work under the STEPS grant.
My name's Annette Evans. I'm the child care director of the Ventures child care program under the Sitka School District.
And we meant to have Ellen Hughes, who's going to come up at the end, but also Lauren Wild up here, but it just seemed like we'd be ganging up on you, so we're going to proceed. A little bit, we represent an organization called the Early Childhood Coalition. You can see some of the members there. Those are the people who might be likely to show up regularly at meetings. We also have a working group called Child Care Now. Most of our work lately, because of the issue of child care, has been in the work group. Current state of child care. You've heard it, you've read it in local articles, you've read it in state articles, you've seen the tribe's report, you've heard your own strategic plan, the will of the people to have child care solved. But if you want reports, articles, and fact sheet, they're also available at sitkakids.com. So you choose the education tab and then Early Childhood Coalition. One thing that we're going to talk about though is that currently Head Start and Betty Lyson Child Care Center have openings, and those openings, if they're not filled, will result in scaled back care. And that's something several of the child cares have experienced recently, Ventures, Betty Lyson, and Head Start.
To clarify, when you're talking staff openings.
Yes, staff openings. Head Start also has openings for children. Leading these closures, temporary closures, lead to stress for families, loss of work or income, and safety issues. For example, anecdotal stories about people who the child care doesn't cover their hours, so instead of taking their child to child care, leaving their children at home alone, unattended. I have some anecdotal evidence. Lauren Wild, who's in the audience, has shared the number of parents who are coming up to her recently telling about their plans to consider moving away from Sitka. And then a very interesting anecdote, a mental health provider in Sitka sharing that the number one concern bubbling up with her families, with the parents and families, is child care in providing mental health. Our organization made an effort to be well represented at the Health Summit. So a long-term goal, it was chosen as one of two choices this year, is creating a stellar child care system in Sitka. And so we're going to tell a little bit about some of the work we've been doing and other work around the state. You probably saw in the Sitka Sentinel and a piece on, maybe you heard on KCAW, Jasmine Shaw through U.S. Extension offered a babysitting class. Some information about the babysitting class is up there. Essentially, 14 students completed a rigorous course to certify them for babysitting. You might wonder, why would we include that or support that? in our efforts to improve childcare in Sitka, and it really is about creating a future for those students where it is a possible career for them, where they'll be well compensated and well benefited. And that's hard to do in a system that's broken. One of the things we've been involved in is advocacy at the state level, and I have good news to report. There's a coalition of coalitions called the Early Childhood Network, and they came up with a strategy of, instead of introducing a bill, adding $15 million to an existing line item in the Alaska budget. During this budget process, childcare received the most written comment of any issue appearing before the legislature. We really targeted Senator Stedman's office, and he included in his counterproposal the budget, the $15 million, which when it was sent back to the full legislature was reduced to $7.5 billion. But Dunleavy signed that, and I'm going to have Annette explain how that money could very easily be distributed, and this is one of the reasons this program was very amenable to the legislatures. There's already a mechanism to getting the money out to child cares.
So licensed child care centers can apply, it's optional, but they can apply for a child care grant that goes to the child care program office. And then you just simply send in your enrollment numbers and you get a certain amount of dollars per child. So it's already a system that's set up and it's really easy, and it comes in directly to the child care program.
So that's the method that our group is advocating, and the Early Childhood Network is advocating, that simple mechanism that already exists. Here's the bad thing. That's good news, but it's 1 year, and how our wages increases. This is all going to wages and benefits. How are those maintained when the funding goes away? And that's a lot of the CARES Act money. That's the question too. Some of the child cares have been reluctant to put money into wages and benefits because what happens when that money goes away? The other thing that you might want to know that's happening at the state level is there was a administrative order number 346. Governor Dunleavy created a task force on child care with the goal of improving availability and affordability of quality child care throughout Alaska. If you're interested, it meets tomorrow at 12 o'clock. It's their third meeting. You as a listener, that's all you get to do. You get to observe. But they're going to attack these things that are up on the board there. The one thing that I think is interesting is they're intending to develop a framework and pilot a program about employer-provided child care. So it'll be interesting to see what that task force does. This is really good news. Got permission from Sitka Counseling to share this news, but there's remaining CARES Act funding, and the THREAD office at the state level, which is involved in child care, put out a grant called the Community Innovation Grant, and this is in line with Sitka Counseling's desire to offer a therapeutic daycare program. And what that is provides daycare to children with emotional and behavioral needs. It's going to have 6 kids starting. Their intention is to start in January, and you might think, what impact could this have on Sitka? 6 kids. They do intend by the second year to go to 12, and if you read the TRIBES report, and if you listen to the directors at a meeting we held with them last year, they are not, our child cares, our daycares are not equipped to give services to children with special needs. So while this is taking kids and serving them directly on this Sitka Counseling campus, it will have an impact on other child cares by giving them the ability to refer children to a more appropriate setting. We do have some sad news to report. Is the Sitka Counseling, the Early Childhood Coalition supported this grant application through soliciting letters of support, and I thank the City of Sitka for providing a letter of support. We also reached out to people expressing willingness to be partners, but one portion of the grant wasn't funded. It was the Child Care Resource Office. was left unfunded, and Annette can tell you some of the things we had hoped that office would do.
So that office would help providers, but it also help parents and kind of just match them up with the needs of their family and the needs of their child in particular, with resources directly here in Sitka. It would also create a career pathway so that we can continue to, or start to develop and grow the workforce in the childcare field here in Sitka.
Yeah, we're getting near the end here. The group is with the STEPS, with collaboration of the STEPS grant. We're creating a child care career pathway summit in the fall, inviting all the key players, and they're indicated up there, to start to build a high school pathway so we can enhance our workforce here in Sitka. Part of the day will be spent examining models that exist up north and developing a timeline for implementing something that we hope to have in place the following school year. And here's our message. It comes down to revenue. You probably knew this part was coming. It really costs money to retain trained employees. Developing the workforce requires money, and families, there's no way families can afford what child cares need to charge to charge so that they can offer competitive wages and benefits. It's broken, it doesn't work. It's like a public sector industry trying to operate in the private sector. So we want to say we are very thankful to the city of Sitka. Melissa Henshaw has been faithfully coming to our meetings, giving us guidance when questions relate to the city of Sitka or other aspects like the Coast Guard. She's been there to help us find information, but we think there's a role for Sitka to play. There are municipal responses in Alaska. Anchorage just passed a measure where marijuana sales tax will go to early childhood education. We've spoken before about the city of Juneau, and I think there's one other fairly large municipality that is providing assistance to child cares. Last slide is we want the city of Sitka to consider its role. Its commission is charged with looking at municipal solutions because our community needs to be a place where families can work and live. We're going to ask Ellen Hughes to come up very briefly, and she works at Betty Lassen Child Care Center. We rarely get to meet with them because they're busy working, and we'd like to invite her up to come give a statement about what it's like in the child cares right now.
Okay, my name is Ellen Hughes and I work at Betty Lassen Child Care Center, and I know that to be true because I was there today, and approximately the first 2 hours I was there I heard my name called about 50 times. So I can verify my name is Ellen and I work at Betty Lassen. That being said, I've been in the early childhood field for right at 35 years, which is a long time. I have not seen in that time the crisis with staffing that we currently have. We fortunately have a large enough facility to break up our preschool room into kind of a younger preschool and then an older preschool with kids that are going into kindergarten. We had to close that second room today because the person that takes that class was sick. That's not uncommon. We try and keep the center open as much as we can, closing maybe a classroom if somebody's sick, but hopefully not the entire facility. So I don't, the answer isn't one specific thing. It's not wages, it's not more staff, it's like a puzzle. You have to have all the pieces together to form the complete picture, and only then are you going to have a good quality program for the community or for wherever you're headed. So that's an up-to-date, today, this is what's happening realization. I mean, that affected probably 6 to 8, maybe 10 families. for just one day. So it's not, I mean, I wish I had Go-Go Gadget Arms where I could be in every piece of the puzzle, but I don't. And it's just, it's hard. It's become really, really hard. And it's still fun. It's still pleasantly fun, but it's a challenge, to say the least.
And then the last thought to think of is we were happy to come here today with good news, but if the good news doesn't result in a change in our situation, and we feel situation is more precarious than it's been in the last 3 years, then what good is the good news? There's 7 spots for infants in Sitka and 120 people. And people are talking about leaving town. So just things to think of, and thank you for your time. Oh, any questions?
Thank you for your time this evening as well. Obviously, a plethora of knowledge, and it sounds like an amazing group to have on this task because I think we all understand from this side of the table as well that this is a concern for not only Sitka but nationwide. So continuing to follow trends and seeing how we as a body can influence positive change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be continuing on with special reports this evening. We'll start with government to government. Chairman?
Thank you, Mayor and Assembly members. Off our 2 meetings in July 5th and July 19th, it wasn't a very big agenda for let alone also combined. Briefly, the Tribal Council discussed a couple items from the Finance Committee at its first meeting and approved a grant justification to strengthen the traditional foods program. That was passed at our last meeting, council meeting. We approved a couple enrollment resolutions, 1 relinquishment resolution. The council approved revisions of the ordinance governing committee, its 3rd reading, final reading. Approved a letter to the U.S. Forest Service regarding Southeast Alaska Sustainability Strategy. And approved resolution to authorize entry into the Alaska Tribal Child Welfare Compact. And last but not least, the council ratified home poll approving the proclamation of the 25th anniversary of the MOU with the city and borough of Sitka. That's my brief report. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming in. Is there anyone else here this evening for government to government reports? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? And everybody in the back of the room jumped up real fast, didn't they? School district? And students and guests. Okay, that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening, my name is Richard Mead. I'd like to welcome everybody to the island paradise called Sitka, where all of our goods and services are dependent upon fossil fuels, also known as Texas tea, black oil, and short-chain hydrocarbons. As we progress in the season, the fireweed is now in full swing, and there's condensation of the windows in the morning, as well as leaves beginning to fall. So please get out there and enjoy the weather because we are in a seasonal change. One thing that I've done since I've seen you last has been I've done a fairly deep dive on the head tax. And by the way, I'll start off with I won't bury the lead, is that we can do a head tax. I've reviewed the Alaska statutes. I've reviewed relevant federal statutes. I've reviewed the history of how all of this came to being, because it came to being through the state, where the governor created a $50 tax and then subsequently reduced it to $34 or $50. I've gone through all the relevant statutes and regulations, and I'm very well aware of the constitutional issues, of the CLIA issues, and so forth. And 3 minutes is not enough time, but we can do it. The relevant state statute, for anyone who's interested in reading it, is AS 43.52.200. One of the important things that we have been a little neglect on is Juneau, since they initiated this, has received over the time north of $180 million. And to me, that's serious money. We now get the $5, but they not only get the $5, they get the sales tax, plus they get the docking, and they get their head tax. And I think that this is something that, a place where we need to be. Ketchikan is also enjoying these extra bits of money, and one of the problems is, or potentially could be solved, if we ask the Alaska Municipal League to find out if they can assist Southeast and all the communities in an effort to get this bounty, because this bounty will not be lasting forever. Yes, we can do a head tax. It's serious money. Let's do it for child care, if nothing else.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else or persons to be heard this evening? Any item not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, approve the minutes of the July 11th Assembly meeting. Item B, approve the following liquor license applications. 1, transfer of ownership application from Ludwig's Bistro Inc. to Our Town Catering LLC at 256 Catlean. And 2, premises diagram application and restaurant designation permit application for Our Town Catering at 256 Catlean.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A and B, Mayor Eisenbeiss,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Yesdad.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on the consent agenda.
Thank you. There are no appointments this evening, so that'll bring us to unfinished business, item C.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-14 on second and final reading, amending Title IV Revenue and Finance of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 4.09 Sales Tax.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-14. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Richard. It's always interesting to read the ordinance and also the chapters that it's related to. This updates the chapter to allow for a year-round 1% tax increase. Now, one of the things that it does is also remove exemptions from the retail sales tax. And one of the aspects that, of course, catches my eye is that one of the exemptions was rent paid as consideration for the use of real property, either for 30 or more consecutive days or the active calendar year, etc. So this will also affect that exemption as well. And when we talk about cost of living, this is another place where it will hit. So as always, it's in order to be as good a citizen as you can, it's important to read these codes, regulations, ordinances. Thank you.
Any other public comment on ordinance 23-14? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
All right, on a motion to approve ordinance 2023-14 on second and final reading, Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item C.
Item D, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-15 on second and final reading, proposing to amend Title IV, Revenue and Finance, Chapter 4.09, Sales Tax of the Sitka General Code by adding a seasonal sales tax increase of 1 additional percentage point in Section 4.09.010, levy of sales tax, and adding Section 4.09.120, exemption from seasonal sales tax, and submitting the question of such an amendment to the qualified voters at the regular election on October 3rd.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-15. Is there any public comment?
I'm back. This is Richard Green. At the last meeting when this was first dealt with, there were several things that I pointed out, and I'm going to point them out again because there may be a different audience. And that is, this is an increase of the 1%, which was levied for a period of about 20 years to cover school bonds, and I believe that includes the PAC. One of the things within the background was the district and the municipality are unprepared to fund any emergency repairs to the building requiring an appropriation for the general fund. And I feel that's pretty serious language when you say you are unprepared, and that now becomes the reason to do this, to add the 1%. What happens, it will not take place until 24. So what was going on with all these 20 years before all this tax that was coming in through the tourists, etc. Also, it has to be noticed that the state has severely diminished educational support. And so this is another reason, which is certainly a very good one. I do believe that Sitka should deal with the concept of kaima aina, which is the local exemption for this 1% tax. They do it in the great state of Hawaii, and I think that every little bit that we can help here in Sitka would be great. You can just actually make it Alaska and just show your driver's license, and that would certainly distinguish you from a tourist. The other thing is that it's supposed to bring in $1.8 million a year, and I think that seems like a lot of money. But you have to remember, recently we dealt with that would be the cost of a crossing by the Raptor Center, to let you know exactly how much money $1.8 million buy. And so, as part of approving this, I think it would be appropriate if the first 3 years of this tax was given to the haul-out. Because if you did that, then that would cover phase 1 completely, because they have a big shortfall. So I think can cover it as we did like Blatchley, but the 1.8 million each year to the haul-out, I think would help complete the project to a state which would be something quite reasonable. So make that adjustment, and God bless you all.
Is there any other public comment on ordinance 23-15? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Again, I'll just say that I'm throwing this out as a way for the community to vote on how they want to pay for their school repairs, maintenance, and upgrades. It's a large cloud that's been looming over our head for quite some time now, and I believe here in the near future we're going to have to deal with that. So whether this passes or not at the ballot box, we'll see. But either way, the community is going to have a discussion on how they want to pay for their school infrastructure, which I think we can all agree is a needed community service that the municipality provides. Anything else from the assembly, Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to say, yes, and kind of repeat what I said last week. And of course, this is just putting it on the ballot for people to choose. And I'm just reinforcing that this is for dedicated funding for schools, which we don't have right now. And this could be used not just to save and use as one, but used to purchase bonds that we would, or receive bonds that we would use for school projects. And a reminder to those in the public too who are concerned, even when we choose to do a bond, if so, we still have to get that to the voters to choose as well. So there's a lot of control there.
Thank you. Anything else? Chris?
Just that I'm more than happy to send this to the voters so they can choose whether they're self-impose a tax on themselves or not. So, yeah.
Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-15 on second and final reading, Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
And Mr. Peck?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item D.
Item E, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-16 on second and final reading, proposing to amend Article 2, the Assembly Section 2.11, prohibitions of the Home Rule Charter of the City and Borough of Sitka by permitting school board members to hold municipal employment other than with the school district during their term of office and the year after vacating the office, and submitting the question on such an amendment to the qualified voters at a regular election on October 3rd, 2023.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-16. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, my name is Richard Ween. This ballot proposal has vexed me. I am really vexed because basically, as we were told last time, well, I'll repeat that that will allow municipal employees to hold school board office. And one of the reasons we were told was that it increases the number of people who might be eligible. Another aspect somebody mentioned at the last time, that if we had to worry about conflicts of interest and all this other stuff, we wouldn't get any work done. And the example that was used were cities, villages up north. But we're a town of 8,500 people. And to me, it is almost inconceivable that we have to open up a venue with 100+ individuals to find eligible people to sit on the board, on the school board. And to me, that says more about us and the seriousness that we have about, we keep hearing it all the time, it's for the children, it's for the children. We have thousands of people who are actually eligible for this. And if we have to make this change, again, I am vexed. Another notion is, here it says that we do not believe the Sitka School District employees should be allowed to serve on the school board, just as municipal employees should not be allowed to serve on the assembly. But if you take that logically, what you do is you have the cross. So you have school members, board members, who, people who work in the school sit on the assembly, and they deal with funding to the schools, and the reverse is also true, where you can have city employees sit on the school board, which also deals with funding. So to me, it's much ado about nothing. I wonder what the real modus of this was. It certainly couldn't be looking for those few extra candidates. And so to me, it doesn't make sense, but then again, we live in a mysterious world, and I am certainly happy to deal with mystery. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on ordinance 23-16? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Seeing none, Sarah?
On the motion to approve ordinance 2023-16 on second and final reading, Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item E.
Thank you. It is a little early, however, I foresee this next item taking substantially longer than 15 minutes. So if the assembly, if we could take our break a little bit early right now, and then get ready for a detailed presentation by Gary White, where he will answer all of our questions perfectly. No pressure, Gary. We got just a minute while we connect to one more person.
You guys want to sort
Okay,
it out?
we're all set? Okay. All right, so this evening we will be moving on to item F, which is adopting the final Gary Paxton Industrial Hall Out project charter with concept, scope, and budget. Tonight, Gary White and Michael Harmon are going to do a presentation and clue the assembly in a lot of deliberation on this item. But first, if I can get a motion to get this one started.
I move to adopt the final Gary Paxton Industrial Park Haul-Out Project Charter with concept for scope and budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to bring the item forward. Gary, Michael, please, you guys have the floor.
Great. Thank you. My name is Gary White. I run the Gary Paxton Industrial Park under the direction of the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board of Directors. First, I want to say that this presentation is a little bit different than the one in the packet. We had a little bit of a kerfuffle where we had to update some some of our project cover charges, or cover sheets here, just to adjust stuff, because the original budget we had in doing the 300 ton now, which doesn't make sense, so we pulled it out. And this information's more, it covers more what we're trying to do. So I'm going to go over this, some of the history that happened, and then Michael's going to take you through our concept for and how we'd like to move forward. So today like I said, we're going to talk about the goals and schedule. We're going to talk about the scope of improvements and everything that we've done in the past. So a project charter is basically it's a document that's going to show us our goals and how we're going to achieve those goals. And so the goals that have been set from multiple public meetings is that we want to have a 100-ton facility because that has the capacity to cover a majority of the fleet. We also heard from our last two private groups that proposed on this and from others in the community that having a larger 300-ton lift would also be nice. And so obviously we don't have the funding to do that now, but how do we build now so we have the ability to expand in the future? You know, when Northline Seafoods owned Lot 4, they had plans to do a lot of barge work, and so we wanted to preserve the existing access ramp for that work. Now they're not moving forward in that direction, so that ramp wasn't as important, but we have heard from the community that it does have some use, and we'd like to be able to do that at some point as well. Obviously, we want to have a shipyard associated with our haul out. We want to grow and maintain our local service jobs. We want to provide infrastructure in case there's an emergency. Right now, if there's a vessel that's starting to sink, the only option is the Ala Marine lift. And what happens if the Ala Marine lift has an Ala Marine boat in it? So we don't have that infrastructure right now. And of course, we want to reduce travel costs to our fleet having to leave town, and it also helps reduce the emissions that are associated with that. So here's the cover sheet here, and as you can see, the prices have increased. We're looking at an overall budget for just phase 1 of this project of just over $14 million. And I want to add one thing. I was in a presentation this afternoon from Southeast Conference, and they were talking. They had a quote in there from the General Harbor Master that said most of their projects had doubled in cost since 2020, which I just found interesting today. But so we have about $8.3 million that the voters voted for 8.1. We had another 100,000 sitting in there. So the whole project is going to be short about $6 million. But as some of you probably have heard or read the news today, we were successful in getting a Denali Commission grant. We found out last Thursday, and that grant is going to be in the amount of $1 million, and that money can be used for purchasing a travel lift or some type of boat hoist piece of infrastructure. So it looks like our delta that we're going to need is about $4.8 million, which is still substantial. Whoop, I went too far there. And so we have, this is our schedule. We've heard from the community that we need to get this thing moving as quick as possible. We are trying to do that. The vote passed in October. In November, the Gary Paxton Board met, and we put together this initial charter. And the charter has been a living document. It's been updated as we move forward. Right away in December, we put out an RFP for professional services to help us engineer this and act as project managers. We ended up putting P&D engineers on staff in March. That same month, they came in and did some initial bathymetry, they did some site surveying, did some other site investigations to determine where is the best spot to put this haul out. And then they came to the board in April, and they gave us a decision matrix to figure out what's the best site. They picked 3 different locations out there. And the 4 things that they looked at was cost of construction, operational efficiencies, the ability to expand, and the overall risk of the project. And they gave each of those scores, each of those things a weight through all 3 sites. And it became very obvious that Site 2 was the preferred site, which is where we're proposing, as it's closest to the yard, to the shipyard, so we have less movement of vessels. And the only thing that was really holding that up is that's where the existing access ramp is. But that that existing access ramp, to really turn that into a full-blown beneficial use of a ramp, really needed a lot of improvements. And we looked at it that if we moved it, the improvements wouldn't be as much, and the city would be further ahead. So now we have our site. Now the P&D and Michael and myself, we sat down and went over a whole bunch of different concepts. We went over 4 different concepts to haul out vessels. We presented all 4 of those concepts to a subject matter group that consisted of local folks that have worked in marine trades, that have worked in yards or tried to develop yards. And they all sat down and looked at the 4 concepts and came up with site number 4, option number 4, concept 4 as the best site to move forward, or best concept to move forward. So on the 22nd of June, we brought that to the board. The GPIC board concurred with the subject matter expert group. And so we've got unanimousness to move forward from both the board and some subject matter groups. So the rest of the schedule here is we've already started geotech permits and field investigation, environmental studies, as this is going to be the critical path, or the stuff that's going to take longest to get done. And by the way, this is stuff that's completely out of our hands. This is dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers, dealing with the EPA. And so this is going to be the thing that's slowing us down. But as soon as we get this passed, hopefully tonight, we can continue to move forward with that in a more official way. Then we're going to go through design, and we're going to looking for a contractor to bring on. And we're going to have that contractor and the engineering firm are going to work on the final design, which I think is a really cool concept, because the engineers are going to come forward, and the contractors might say, hey, maybe you should do it this way instead of that way, because my experience is. So it helps us get to a really good project and a really good final design. And then, of course, we're going to order the materials as soon as we figure out what's happening, and then we're going to do on-site construction. So as you see here, the on-site construction hopefully is starting next year at this time. That's a lot of things to get through in a year, but we're pushing to get that far. So the general scope that we come up with in our concept 4 is that we're going to procure a 150-ton boat hoist. We're going to build the piers that support that. The piers are also going to have the capacity to put a 300-ton lift through that in the future. We have to have a washdown pad. We have to have water treatment. That's an EPA rule. The boats have to be washed, so we have to put that in. We're going to put in as much yard space as we possibly can with the monies that we have. We have to be cognizant of stormwater runoff and how that's being treated, so we don't get into any environmental issues. And then, of course, eventually we want to have power, lighting, water, sewer, have restrooms out there, all that other stuff. We're not going to be able to fit all this in phase 1, and we can't even fit it all in the phase 1 that we have funded now. But this is the overall goal, because this would give us a decent yard. The stuff that we're asking for today is going to allow us to get boats out of the water. It's going to allow boats to get started getting work on, but it's not going to be the full bells and whistles haul out that I'm sure the community wants. And I already ran through all of the public meetings that we had. And this is our subject matter expert panel. We've got the first 2 gentlemen worked at Hallett Point Marina. Eric works at Allen Marine. Jeremy tried to develop a haul out here in town. And then Greg, he developed and managed the Wrangell Yard, which is a very successful yard in Southeast Alaska. And I'm so happy we have him on our team. So I kind of went over this. You know, the yard or concept 4 was preferred. The washdowns were site number 3, which Michael will go into, was preferred. We're going to try to use as much as the existing shipyard or the existing slabs and topography that we have in the yard to keep the cost down, so we can try to get as much yard as we possibly can. You know, people talked about parking, they talked about a yard transporter, and all these other things that I think will be important moving forward. And I just want to show you, this is what we're talking about for folks that aren't really too familiar. This is Huna's 200-ton lift, and as you can see, that thing takes up a lot of space. There's the ramps that go out. They have their washdown pad right below the ramp, which means that it's kind of a bottleneck in my opinion, but anyways, this is how we're gonna move forward, and I'm gonna turn it over to Michael.
All right, good evening. Yeah, I wanted to start with this picture for those who may not be familiar with a traditional waste lift operation, and it will help you visualize a little bit better as I go into the concept drawings. But traditionally, you'll see a two-pier formation here, and I'm trying to highlight on the screen so everybody can see, with a deep water slip in the middle. And this lift goes out over the top of this, running on each of those tracks, and pulls the boat out in the middle there. Typically we'll have a fill section out to deep water with a bulkhead wall right along this edge here to create as much deep water close to your fill section as possible and reduce the amount of piling going in the water. It's the expensive part. You will notice in our concept as well, you'll notice this pier is much wider on one side. We have that in our concept to allow for that bigger 300-ton lift to go out on this facility in our concept out to go seaward, and I'll show you that on the next slide. Also, you'll see a building here, outbuilding for restrooms, mechanical and office space, pretty traditional features you'll see. Moving on here to our preferred concept. Again, you'll see much of the traditional features. So we have 0.6, I've got my notes here, pull this out so I can read it here. We've got a little over 0.6 acres of fill, comes out here to a bulkhead pile supported wall, and then you have your traditional two piers going out in the bright yellow for 150 ton. That's our phase 1 base. And then the light yellow depicted in this gets you out to that 300 ton lift. So you can see the slip in both sides out here is much larger. Our 150 ton lift has 32 feet of clearance, where you're getting out here at 40, maybe even larger than that to fit the larger boats in. Additional alternatives could be a queuing float here with a gangway that goes down. It's, could be ADA compliant. Some of those features we're looking at in the additive alternates. We do not have the light colored funded at this time. So the bright darker yellow is kind of our base layout with this fill sheet pile wall. This sits in between the Hanson Marine Dock and the SIAC building. Site locations really critical, center to the park, ideally located to the adjacent uplands that we have to park vessels and keep the distance that the marine hoist has to travel for a long-term operation costs down. We're also depicting here and looked at for the multi-purpose dock, the dashed line here depicting a maximum size vessel that multi-purpose dock can support. How does that fit with this haul out? We felt like the egress was worked out just fine. So this is the marine concept. As we move up into the uplands, again, funding's limited. We did a conceptual layout here of multiple size boats that would fit with 150 ton lift, phase 1 approach. In reality, you'd be looking at a gravel yard that's very similar to what you see out there today, except we have to do minimal grading to collect all the storm water and treat it. We need to have a wash down pad that has higher level treatment that would go to the stormwater, the waste water treatment plant ultimately for that to be treated. We have the parking here to keep boat parking customers, their personal vehicles out away from the travel lift operation, much safer. And you can just see kind of the maneuverability of a boat hoist, how much room gets taken up just for its egress to get to different parking spaces. Boat yards will start taking up a lot of space. All the available room in the park could likely be utilized for future shipyard services. Everyone pretty much agreed that this is the best first location for the washdown pad, easy access to come in and back into that, and be able to leave a boat there for washdown and not have your travel waste get stuck. Some spots they can get stuck if there's tall masts and they don't have room to back out. And it also does not bottleneck our piers out here if they want to have a boat doing washdown and still be pulling boats off the piers. That's what a lot of the haul outs have made that error, and some of the advantages of having our experts kind of guiding here to not make that mistake. Also, one that the haul outs have appreciated over the years is making sure your washdown is capable, even if you can't afford it in the long run. Put the tubes in there when you pour the concrete to be able to have it heated in the future if you can afford a boiler down the line. So we want to be doing all of the above. This general layout for phase 1 will get us 19 slips. We did look at a full build out just to see how things would fit, what type of capacity. We're going after grants possibly go for. We're getting over 60 boats in this layout. We also have the gravel ramp coming back in because over here to the left, north of the page here, as you may or may not know, the preferred location here covers up the current gravel ramp that's out there if you're familiar with the site. So this kind of shows how that can come back in play in actually a much better location topographically to extend that ramp out further and have it be able to operate at more tides, whereas where it is currently now drops off very quickly after the end of that, and really be cost prohibitive to keep extending that ramp. So we get that in a better location, and we know what we do here to not preclude expansion in the future being forward looking like this. So I really liked the exercise that we did on that. Going forward, Gary covered a lot of this. Our base staying within the budget that we have through the discussions. There's a lot of more immediate needs that were identified that would fit well in phase 1 if additional funding came in. We could do them and it would fit within our permit, could be done quickly. Kind of what we move out to phase 2 are items that couldn't fit in our permitting, our current array, really kind of starting over. It would be a longer view in the future. And if I go to the itemized budget here, that was one thing we took out just recently doing a review of the items. We took out the 300 tons. That broke our rule. That would need additional permitting. Doesn't really belong in phase 1, so that has been taken out since the packet was submitted to get it more accurate in the presentation to match the charter and the cover sheet, which is accurate. It has the 300 ton out of that phase 1, giving you that total 14.166 million. And then this identifies the bare bone basics of what we get to the budget. A little bit flabbergasted, honestly, that our base items, when we were asked what is the bare bones to get this operated, and Gary spoke to how extreme costs have gone up over time, that we're actually still staying very accurate to that goal within budget. And a lot of these things additional, other than the concrete washdown pad, that would have been liked to be up in this top rung when we gave that original budget. But all the rest of these kind of come up through the development of the project from the experts of things to consider in your phase 1. So that's really what's growing our price here from the very original first draft charter. While I'm on the screen, I think it's really critical, one, to know what's in the base that we can afford now. That's highlighted in items 1 through 7 here. 2, also the importance of the additional items on this being built into the charter. It allows Gary Paxton Industrial Park for the flexibility and authority to accomplish those items if the funding is available. And as we heard, we got a $1 million grant coming in, so it allowed the GPIP board to make priority decisions of what goes in, and they can work out of this list. So this is sort of a really important list that you're adopting tonight, and be comfortable with giving the board the authority to work within and us to work with them within. So if you have any questions on this one, I pause right now if I can help if that's appropriate, or Mayor, should I move
We'll
on?
come back to questions. Thank you.
I can pull this back up. Need to go over it. Gary covered the schedule well, belabor that, and we've had really good participation with everything Melissa's doing, helping me out, putting things on our website, and really trying to make an effort there. So we encourage everyone to go there. You can comment on the custom email website we have there, and you can see all the drawings and everything. And I have made presentations and posted it on there, so you can have kind of a verbal walkthrough if you're unable to miss the meeting. So thank you for the time to present.
Thank you both. We will go to public comment, so don't go too far, because I'm sure the assembly will have a bunch of questions. But I appreciate your presentation. Is there any public comment on item 23-093?
Good evening, Richard Mead. I'd like to thank Gary White and Mike Harmon and everybody else who was involved in this. It was certainly a lot of work to get this all put together and conceptualized and actually contacting all the appropriate sources, including P&D, which was here already and had knowledge of our situation. One thing for sure is that the EPA, the environmental aspect, they're well known. They know Silver Bay very well because of the pulp mill, and there are a lot of issues related to that. There used to be an environmental fund, and I think that was all spent. I don't know if it was spent on landfill or whatever, but I'm sure I'll never get an update. But it'd be nice to know where that money has gone. One of the things that I noticed is that where things come back to you, the Zyak Logistics, which used to be Northland Seafood and then Salmon Shares, we have the ability to keep that building. And if you just go back to that slide, you can see how it occupies a very strategic area for our future haul out. So we had it within our power to, in essence, prevent that and keep that within the city fold. Another thing that I didn't see within the budgeting is the electrical, the transformers and everything else that will need to be placed. Water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, and I'd certainly like to hear about that. I remember when we were considering this years ago, just electrical would be millions of dollars to get this thing up and running. You'll notice that the, we'll call it the Phase 1 light is $8.2 million. And I hope that they're able to stay within that budget, but the full Phase 1 is 14 million, and that's where that 1% could come into it. If we really believe that the fleet is so important, you give that 1% to them over the next 3 years, and I think they can really build out something really incredible. If you look at the picture, it is amazingly tight. If you just see where all the pieces are, you throw a little wind in there and a little of this and a little of that, and things will be a very interesting time. But if I had just a couple of questions to ask, it would be where is the infrastructure as it relates to the budgeting, and meaning that is the city going to be paying for the electrical transformers, the sewage, the possible treatment, etc. So thank you very much, and job well done. Mr. White and Mr. Harmon, thank you.
Is there any other public comment on item 23-093? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Gary and Michael, I'm sure if you just want to come back up, I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions for you. So,
So, I know when we first started talking about this, a list like you were talking about, like you put up there is exactly what I was hoping for. That where we get down to the amount of money we have, and then as more funds become available, we already know what's coming next. And so, obviously that $1 million we got already, but I know we're gonna keep going after other funds. So this is exactly what I hope would happen. Get hauling boats out. And then as we have funds available, we start, and I think that, it could be quite a while, and of course inflation's gonna happen, but as we go after funds and things, we go for it. And so, I appreciate that, and I've been following this, and there's no surprises here for me, but, again, I love that, okay, bare bones, and then as we can do things like that, that's it, exactly what I hoped would happen, so thank you.
I do have a couple questions for you both while you're here. One you may not know the answer to, but I wonder if it was discussed during the meetings. Allen Marine, when they bought their new travel lift, they left a pier-based system like this in favor of a ramp. Do we know why they did that? Why that was their preferred method?
I think it was cost for their site location is my understanding, but it's great having Eric, who was the project manager on that project for Allen Marine, was part of our subject matter group. And,
okay, so he worked on that
He
one.
strongly recommended going with how we're doing it.
Okay, perfect. That eases my concerns because if Allen Marine switches to a different system, and I don't understand why submerging your lift in salt water is the best option. However, seeing that it gives me a little bit of pause to see if that's the way to go. And then my second question, comment on this. Were either of the two neighbors who are going to be directly affected by this included in these conversations, Hanson Maritime and then SAAC Logistics? And the reason I ask that question is because we are severely corking them with some of these. If you look at Hanson Maritime Dock, if we ever get a 300-ton pier and a max-size floating vessel at the same time, plus a boat sinking, Hanson Maritime's not able to leave his dock there. I think we're kind of going right out in front of him and making maneuvering in his area rather difficult. Hanson Maritime is a massively important part of this community. I would hate to see what would happen if we did not have him in town. SAAC Logistics, while I understand you can't control the property around you, especially when we put in another ramp. I don't know if they have a Tidelands lease or anything right now, but it seems like they're really getting bottlenecked in here. So were they part of these conversations, and what are their thoughts on this number 4 going forward?
Yeah, I've talked to Lee and let him know what the plans were. And the likelihood of, on this drawing, it doesn't look like he can get his tug in and out, but he can get his tug in and out. And the likelihood that we're going to have a 400-foot ship there is pretty low. I've talked to him. He didn't seem to have any big objections, but I don't want to speak for the man. As far as SAAC, when we sold that building to them, this was always the plan to put a marine hall out here. We've had plans in this area since 2007. When we sold that building, they said that they were going to use it as the marine service sector, which would fit perfectly into what we were doing. It sounds like they might be trying to change their preferred business model, but everybody walked into this eyes wide open that we're building a hall out here, we plan to build a hall out here, and we're going to build a hall out here. There was a public vote. That was after the sale, but this has been the plan for a while. So.
There also was a lot of discussion, deliberation, and transparency in the sale of the Hanson Marine site in terms of the larger boats and the multi-purpose dock and how constrained that site was. I feel like the city's been very transparent throughout, including the sale, about how restricted that coming in and going would be in purchasing that site, selling it to Hanson Marine.
Okay, great. That does ease some of the concerns. And it's like I said, Hanson Marine and Lee I think they're vital to the community and the surrounding areas. When your boat does sink and then you need to come out to the haul out to get it hauled, he's the guy that's going to take you out there. And I also understand that Pat Glob wouldn't have built a ramp right there if it wasn't a preferred haul out spot. He knew that as well many, many years ago, and I think that's why we're looking at this spot again, is that it works well with the rest of the yard. So I'm excited to see the small scaled down version. I think that'll get us going. I'm really excited to see this one in front of us. I know that's big dreams and big wishes. I'm going to vote for this tonight because I don't have any better knowledge than any of the experts that have come before. But I'm going to continue to look at this. It's harder to look 20 years ahead. I'm going to continue to look at this with an eye of what are the problems we're going to run into in 20 years. And if I have any of those, I'll pass them on. So thank you for your time this evening on this. I do appreciate it.
Crystal?
I also support this. Just a couple of questions for my own clarity. So the options, items 8 through 20, are those prioritized in order of, how are we handling that after the fact? Do you have a way to figure out, is it based on money or grants that are available for this specific item? How do you move forward with those?
We would move forward to those with the chief of board. Apologize. We move forward with those with the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board, and our vision of crafting this charter and including those is sort of giving that balance of clarity that these are the items that we would work within. They are not in priority order. We certainly have recommendations for the board that we would provide as additional money comes. One real clear one right out of the gate that we thought would fit in the base when we put the original budget together was a concrete washdown pad, and we're sitting on a temporary one right now. So that would be one right out of the gate that we would recommend doing, and we can help guide through that list as we go and money comes available. Ultimately, we're looking to the board to make that call guidance to us.
Okay. And that was actually my second one, so I see that the temporary is listed at $325. In order to make that permanent, you would need an additional $300 for a total of $625. Am I understanding that correctly?
We would need an additional $250,000 because $50,000 would come out of the top for the temporary. We wouldn't need a temporary one anymore at $50,000, so that would come out. So the delta or net gain would need to be $250,000 added to get that one in there.
Yeah, basically 275,000 of that. Dang. 275,000 that's going to be in getting water service there and getting the sewer service, the lift station, the water procurement facility. So just 50,000 is going towards that temporary thing. Versus now we can put in 300, so like Michael said, it's a 250 game, but this is the roll-up numbers. I was just trying to provide you the broken down numbers of how it's going to be.
And then my third one, if all goes to plan, it'll be operable 1/1/25. Is that when it's out of construction would be completed?
Knock on wood, hopefully.
Construction completed by then. I'm more in control of that piece, so I'm feeling decently confident. Permitting is our biggest, there's always risk factors, of course, to projects, and permitting, we have it on the shorter side of our window that we're counting on. I mean, I've seen it take 2 years. If there's any sort of reservation that comes into that permitting from any organizations, that can quickly waylay this into a 2-year like we're seeing on the Seaplane and the other projects. So I put that as the highest risk to schedule right now.
JJ?
To continue on that permitting question, is that a state process, a federal process, and who are the kind of main entities involved in permitting for this?
It's all of the above. It's federal and state level. The permitting process invites all regulatory agencies in to comment. So it's sort of up to them if they want to comment, how many will engage. But you will definitely be seeing the Corps of Engineers. You'll be seeing the fisheries in on this, both at the state and federal level. Marine protection will all apply. Some of the longer lead items that we have to study and figure out. So it's, yeah, this is pretty robust in terms of having most of all the in-the-water features that trigger most everybody wanting to comment.
And out of that process, in the options for 8 through 20, which ones would possibly have to become part of phase 1 due to comments from permitting?
So that was why we took in my highlight, darked it out, made it too dark for you to read it, and I apologize if that big red there is the 300-ton taken out, moved to phase 2, because that really would trigger new permitting. All the rest of these, I feel we could bring in pretty quickly and fit it within our permitting array. A lot of it's uplands, which helps, and we'll be including these items in our permitting, especially the in the water ones, because you always want to go big. You can always go smaller. You can't go bigger. So that's why in a lot of ways the permitting has been able to move forward, even though these decisions aren't finalized yet, because we're kind of taking that approach of going big with it.
So there could be, what I'm hearing just to confirm, a fairly kind of rolling phase 2, because the permitting would be done for most of it with exception to that 300 pound.
Yeah, I mean, a rolling, we call all of this phase 1. I know it gets complicated, but everything on this list could be rolling and go in, and we consider this all part of phase 1 for that very reason, that it has that flexibility to roll in. If it ultimately doesn't get funded and we're done with this project, they would move to phase 2, probably as a pretty high priority because they made phase 1. But phase 2 is everything kind of looking, it helps with the drawing difference too here. If I go back to these, looking at this drawing, the full phase 2 build out, it's everything on the downward of this page of the main road is phase 2, where phase 1 going to this drawing here, it's everything on the top half above the road, and we also took out that lot, is it good enough, 6 also would be in phase 2 on that side of the road, so it's a much smaller footprint that we'd be able to permit now.
I think I saw a name associated with the contractor. Has that been decided, or is that an open bid process?
The only contractor we have hired at this point is P&D Engineering. And we, in the charter, we just have our estimates of what we're planning it would be for each phase moving into construction. And I do want to recognize how great of a job they've done. We didn't say their name enough tonight in terms of producing a lot of these materials. I want to recognize them.
So those estimates are based off of engineering estimates, not a process
Correct.
with a builder?
Our very first numbers were based off of staff doing the best we could, and then this final rendition is off of their expertise going through it, and pretty proud actually how well we aligned, surprisingly, with all the increased costs that have been going on.
Some fine-tuned questions here. Will this be fenced?
Not in the phase 1 budget, but that's an amenity you would typically see and you would see in that in the depiction I had as an example. That security, fencing, gates are important features recommend getting to at some point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank Michael and Gary for all the work that you put in on this. This has really been just a great project, and you guys did what you said. You were going to have a lot of public involvement, a lot of industry involvement, and you guys did it. And I really appreciate all that, because I felt like, as a fisherman and the future user of this yard, you let us all have a voice, and that's been just great. I guess one question I do have is, now that we know that it sounds like it's confirmed that we do have this $1 million coming in, that's going to free up some of our phase 1 budget. Is that going to go before the GPIP board here soon? We can start adding in some of those line items. So, okay.
Yeah, we had a meeting, Michael and I, with P&D this morning, and that was exactly what we talked about, is how quickly we can get this back in front of the board. And we all have very good ideas of, like Michael said, a permanent concrete pad. Maybe going for the better machine that's all terrain, since we're going to have some site issues. And then there's multiple other things that we can do, but we've asked those guys to break it down on costs and give us some options that we can get to the board and get that moving as quick as we can to keep this project moving.
Yeah, okay, great. No, that sounds awesome. And then I guess one thing I did want to point out to the assembly here, when it just comes to the budgeting process that the GPIP board went through, and something that was pointed out by P&D, is the contingency and indirect cost is set at 35%, which is $1.8 million. Potentially that may be money that doesn't get used up and might get applied into some of the other things that we're looking for in phase 1. So, but they wanted to present a worst case scenario. So, hope, cross our fingers, we can use some more of those items in phase 1 that are right now in red. So.
And add on to that, and then Kevin, if you have anything, I'll come to you. As we were going through the discussions, I also saw the 1.1 for the travel lift that's going to come out of this budget, and then can easily support doing a permanent washdown pad as opposed to a temporary one. I hate to spend a whole bunch of money on a water filtration system for Indian River, only to tear it down and then build a water filtration plant out the road a little bit later. So if we could just do that permanent right away and just get that done and not have to build both, that's my preference. Of course, GPIP will be the ultimate guiding on that, but I do agree with that as well. Kevin, did you have anything for the assembly or for Gary or Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any questions. I just want to be really brief. I share the thanks that everyone has been giving on the assembly for the people involved with this. I think Gary, Mike, and GPIP board and everyone else involved. I know there's stakeholders who've been involved as well, not just the community. I just think it's a wonderful thing how you have included the public and an open process, and I think it's really helping. And I'm just grateful. I think that this is a crucial piece of infrastructure that is worth investing in. Even if we don't have all the money right now, it's just, we got to get this done. It's very important, and I'm grateful for the progress you've made, and I totally approve this or support this.
Tim?
I echo all those same things. This is a great thing. I've been watching with interest to see what this comes up. I like your list in terms of as more funding comes available, we already know we're permitting for things that are going forward. I am looking forward in the future to hearing about revenue and costs in terms of running this on an ongoing basis, and whether or not some of that revenue might help with some of these things, but that's not part of this conversation.
Just a quick comment. The fact that there's nobody here is a testament to the job you guys did. Because some of us were at these meetings where there was a lot of people and a lot of them were really mad. And there's nobody here because you guys have included everybody in the process, and they obviously felt heard and know that they can continue to be heard. And so I think if you ever want to show why this is working, is remind you of the fact that there isn't a whole bunch of mad fishermen here right now. So thank you guys.
They're not here mad because they're out on the ocean mad right now.
There is that.
Can I add a comment real quick? This is, I've been in the GPIT chair here for 15 years, and this is one of the smoother projects. I mean, it took a while to get here, but we moved as fast as we could because we realized that this is super important to the community. We don't have one right now, but I'm very happy that we're moving forward. I'm very happy that the voters voted for it. I think that the fact that the voters voted for it, and we had 8.18 of our own money into it, was the deciding factor of the Denali Commission to give us the cash, because they told me there was no way we were getting that grant, and then I just kept pushing that point of the community's already in. It'd be great if you all supported us as well. So I think we can use those types of messages in going forward to the federal and state funders as well. So I'm very happy with this.
Great, thank you. Anything else from the assembly? One last question, Gary. I have a 19-foot skiff. Will I be able to haul out at this facility?
Yeah. $150 a day.
Thank you both for your presentation today. Super informative. Gary, I'm not sure where the kerfluffle was earlier with your presentation, but it came out perfect. It looked fine to me. So, yeah, we're all good on that one. Sarah, on the motion.
Okay, on the motion to adopt the final GPIP call-out project charter with concept 4 scope and budget, Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Yestat?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item F.
That brings us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening, Richard Weem. A couple of things. One is that I listened to an interesting lecture on when you have staff, engineering, meaning staff like the city of Boston trying to figure out what the tunnel would cost versus what the final cost and the true contracting cost is, and they went over a whole list of why those two things don't match. And I thought it was very revealing. I'd like to quote T.S. Eliot here because I think it's apropos, and that this is the way the world ends, this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a haul-out. And it's very important to understand when we hear that there are going to be no 400-foot boats. I do remember at one point when we were going to get boats from South Africa coming up for water with tankers. And we still have a water contract out there, and they still have obligations which they have to, speak to. I know no one in the city is going to really speak about it, but if they do enact their water contract, I wonder how many tankers we'll have up here and how that will be. I hope this isn't a case of how soon we forget. Another thing is really wasn't mentioned during the presentation is that the phase 1 and phase 2 are about $30 million, and the completion of phase 2-ish is 2027, and what the costs at that time will be is anybody's guess. And by the way, I believe that the Fed has a meeting coming up, I think this week, and it is well thought that they will increase the base rate by 25 points, meaning the prime interest rate, and this will affect everything around us. I don't know whether people have noted that Brent crude today inched up to $83.27 a barrel, and that's the benchmark. And whether you realize it or not, the Saudis and Russia wanted over 100. And that may be good a little bit for Alaska's budget, but the bottom line, it ain't good for people who have to use fuel and have to earn a living. And that's what's coming up. And in August, there's going to be the BRICS meeting, actually BRICS Plus. You figure out what that acronym means, and there are 47 other countries that want to join it. They're looking at establishing a new currency backed by gold and trying to get away our reserve currency. So there are a lot of things going on. The European PMI, which is the Purchasing Managers Index in Europe, has just plummeted. I leave you to figure out what it means. to us. Thank you.
Anyone else for personal misdemeanor any item on or off tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, if there's no one else, I'd like to speak, if person to be heard.
Please,
Okay, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank.
if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Oh, sorry, yes, Kevin Mosher. I wanted to thank the members of the public and the assembly for passing items D and E on second reading. Both putting proposition questions on the next election to give them the choice to one and bring back the additional 1% during the summer to support the schools, support school buildings and repairs, and then the other one to allow members of the city and borough of Sitka employees, excluding school employees, to serve on the school board. I just really appreciate it. It was a very smooth process. I want to thank all the staff who've helped us and work on this and get this done. Legal and Sarah helped us a lot too. Very grateful, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. That'll bring us to reports this evening. We'll start with my report. So Sitka did have another just about 10,000 passenger day here recently, and it was actually quite a different day than I spoke of last time. And the biggest difference this time is that ships were staggered. We had one ship that got in about noon while another one was leaving about 1. And so what that did is we had a large passenger load, but it eased the burden on the buses, on downtown, on city infrastructure, on city services, and all those trying to commute around. So a 10,000 person day with staggered ships feels much different than a 10,000 passenger day with all of the ships parked at once and dropping everybody at once. Along those same lines, participated in a CLIA meeting that they hosted. It was definitely a meeting to show you the bright side of cruising, as I think Chris and JJ can attest to. The interesting part came at the end of this meeting when they had opportunities for questions. I raised a question about the passenger loads and how Sitka was experiencing some growth heartaches, and Juneau echoed that, Ketchikan echoed that. And it's really interesting to hear from both of those communities that they're both saying too much. So now I think the ball is back in the cruise lines court because in just about every presentation I've been to, they indicate that they're going to work with the communities for the correct level of cruising. So I think I need to see some of that action now, of them actually working with the communities on the correct level of cruising. Ketchikan, Juneau, and Sitka have all said that this is a level that we're having a hard time dealing with, and we're not able to host this or potentially anymore. So we'll see what comes from that. And then finally, attended the graduation of the AmeriCorps class this year. There was quite a few members that received certificates, a couple that received a 2-year certificate for their participation in the program, but they seemed excited to get out in the community. As we've seen in years past, about half of them are going to be staying in the community for a while, and we'll see how long they call Sitka home. But I know quite a few people who come up here with AmeriCorps and either stayed for 5, 10, 15 years or are still here. So it's definitely a good program, and was happy to eat a slice of cake with them. I think that might have been the reason I went. But John.
Thanks, Mayor. We've just got a handful of good news items I want to read out. I forgot to get this one in the correspondence section, but you notice there's a letter in here that DEC congratulated us on achieving URSA major status and water system excellence for 2022. So that letter's in the front of your packet. It was already discussed about the Denali Commission grant for the haul out lift. We had a lot of good news on grants this week, but that's one of them. The other one, the hydroelectric production incentive program from DOE, that's section 242. We got a letter just today that we were awarded that incentive program. So we did get, they calculated for 21 and 22, and we will receive incentive payments under that program. We were also just selected today for another ETIP grant. There were 9 island and remote communities across the nation that were chosen for this, and we did get that as well. And specifically, it talks about how we're going to analyze and compare future forecasted energy demand, accounting for increased loads from heating, electrification, and electric transport, and looking at decarbonization technologies. What I found great about this program, because I know there was some concern about us essentially becoming an R&D center for DOE, there was a quote from the Acting Assistant Secretary, Alejandro Moreno, that said, "Ownership and collaboration within communities is at the heart of ETIP. For hard-to-reach communities that have historically felt out of sight and out of mind, the DOE hears you and is here to work with you on your vision," and your is emphasized here, on your vision of a clean energy future. So to me, that means they're going to work with us, they're going to hear what our goals are, and they're going to help us get things across the finish line. So lots of good news on grant programs.
Yeah, 242 is absolutely huge. Brian?
No report.
Liaison representatives this evening. George?
Just a quick one from the P&Z meeting. So there was a pretty good discussion about community gardens. And I don't think one of the sites is going to be all that controversial, but the other one is, so it's coming. And there was a lot of very divergent views. And I'm not sure if they're going to continue to advocate to that side or try and find another one, but it's coming, and it's coming to us. Just kind of giving you a heads up. Like I said, they had 2 sites that the one of them was out by Price Street, which I don't think is going to be very controversial, but the other one over by the junior high is, and there's no way around that. So it's coming, and we'll see what comes of it when it finally gets to us.
Jim?
Police and fire. So I think we kicked over the hornet's nest with a couple of things on commercial transportation. So they did go in front of that group, got quite a bit of public comment, and so then we, John, Kevin and I, and Sarah, held a town hall with some stakeholders with that, very well attended. Quite a bit of comment, we learned quite a bit, I think. So I think this is also coming to us at some point, but we're quite a ways away from that, I think, because there's quite a bit of work to do. I know tomorrow night, police and fire will once again be hearing comment and presenting and talking about this a little bit. 3 of the commissioners were at our town hall too, so they have quite a bit of interest in it and paying close attention to it. So that's coming for us over time. I think it's going pretty well. Got a lot of interesting comments.
Judy?
Treating landscape met, and it's the summertime, they are out there tending to the gardens around town, so if you see them, please thank them. We have some new t-shirts, so I hope you recognize them as our treating landscape committee. Also, Tourism Task Force met July 12th, and at a work session, discussed a lot of things, got some more information on directives. We broke into groups to look at the first 4 in detail. We'll come to that 5th one that we gave them later on, because that's the kind of network with Alaska, the other communities in Alaska. They are meeting again at 6 p.m. on August 9th in this room if anyone wants to attend. That is another work session, but it is open to the public.
Any other? Kevin, yes.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. As a school liaison, I just wanted to introduce myself again to the new temporary superintendent. So we met briefly, very briefly, last week. Just sat down for a few minutes and introduced myself. Even though we had met years ago, he just let me know he's starting a job. He's still kind of catching up, very much in the learning stage for a couple weeks, but he is eager to help us keep things running smoothly and make improvements and also ultimately find another superintendent. But I was pleased with the meeting. He seems very much as when I knew him 25 years ago, very kind and good demeanor with the staff, and just seems like I think he'll be a good fit for a while, for as long as he's here.
Great, thank you. Any other liaison reports? Sarah?
Our next regular meeting is August 8th. And then I wanted to go over the following vacancies that are to be filled in the regular election on October 3rd. We have 3 assembly seats, 2 3-year terms, and a 1-year term. We have 3 school board seats, 2 3-year terms, and 1 2-year term. So the candidate filing period is open. It closes at 5 p.m. on August 4th. If folks are interested, they can give us a call or stop by our office. And then finally, I will review our current vacancy list on boards and commissions, the Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services, Investment Committee, Local Emergency Planning, Parks and Rec, Police and Fire, Tree and Landscape Committee. So if folks are interested, they can stop by our office.
Great, thank you. Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, that will bring us to adjournment. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you everyone for your time this evening.